welcome to another episode of Tech Talk with AFO. A round of applause for my guys. Demosh and Ife. Guys, how you guys doing today?
Very, very well.
A lot has happened in the tech space from the last time we met.
A lot.
Right?
A whole lot.
This week we have a long list of things to discuss. You know, as usual, we'll delve into the significant shifts in the tech landscape. And our focus is always on what are those interesting issues that is worthy of discussion. Today, we'll begin our discussion with the mass layoff in the tech industry. And when I say mass layoff, the big guys are laying off big time, right? The one that made the news of recent is the one with Tesla. And that's what we'll be using as our key example today. Meta laid off, Apple laid off, Microsoft laid off. Tesla has recently implemented a strategic layoffs across its software services and engineering departments. These moves are part of effort to streamline operations and focus on major projects like autonomous driving and humanoid robots. You know, I mean, so when these people are doing this layoff, they have all this big language to describe it. So I want us to look at it today and see what will be the implication for us in Africa, especially Nigeria. We have quite a number of folks in the tech space now. They are in tech because of the opportunity there. So guys, I would like us to discuss it, right? We would also be looking at other conversation. I want us to look at the sentencing of this Binance guy, the founder of Binance, Changpeng Zhao, right? He received a 4-month prison sentence in US. So the question would be, how would this impact the Nigerian case? I want us to look at that as well. Cryptocurrency has been seeing a lot of attention for different reasons, right? So guys, I want us to look at that as well. As usual, we have our social media segment. You know, we pick up a news in social media and see what it's about and have our own conversation around it. So this week we're looking at the back and forth exchange between Wizkid and Davido. What has it got to do with, I mean, I don't understand why they brought Don Jazzy into their back and forth. I want us to look at that as well. Very important to me, and I'm sure you guys know why this fourth conversation will be interesting. Demola Ife, 7% of Nigerian youths between the age of 15 and 24, just 7% has ICT skills. Does that come to you guys as a surprise? This is a news from UNICEF.
It actually comes as a surprise to me though, because with the way tech is like booming in like Nigeria, we have a lot of kids, a lot of youths adopting technology, but I think my observations was just like bound to Lagos. So I think that was where I got it wrong. I was factoring.
Finally, Demola, this is the one you love the most, I know. ChatGPT just launched GPT 4.0. I tested and used and I'm like, which direction are we going? Demola, are we where we should be? Demola, I think that should be from you first.
So I'll start by saying that I spoke to a friend about this a couple of days ago, and I told him that it was a mixed feelings for me, right? I was excited, at the same time wary or scared, as the case may be. You know, so it's a case, you know, when you eat very hot amala, right, with whatever favorite stew you like or soup, you're enjoying it, but it's very peppery. So that feeling of I'm enjoying it, I feel a bit uncomfortable, that thin line. So I think that's the first thing. Second thing is he responded by saying that in this age of AI, right, the children of the slaves will become kings. And that was very profound for me, right? Because what that means is that for the first time in history, there's actually some sort of like a leveler. It's going to be democratized to the point where everyone will have access to it. The third thing he said was that English language is going to be the programming language of the future.
Hold your thoughts. Yes. It was supposed to be your opening remark, right? Because we'll delve into it when we get to that segment. If your quick opening remark, so we can move on to the first topic.
Yeah, well, we've had a lot of like news regarding AGIs, and also we've had like so many things have happened just within these short weeks. And the one that comes striking to me is like one of the founding member of OpenAI. That's his name is Ilya. So he actually left as soon as they released the GPT-4o. Although initially I was excited. I'm excited about the new GPT release, but I'm actually scared that because the reason why Ilya left, no one knows. Like everyone is just saying, okay, it might be due to this or due to that. And he's one of the major founding members, like as in.
If I hold your thought, I'll tell you why you have to hold your thought, okay? Hold your thought because both of you, for some reason, it's a mixed feeling. You love the way it works, but you are kind of scared of the direction we are going. But let's start with our first topic today, our conversation around the layoff. The recent tech layoffs, like I said earlier, with a spotlight on Tesla. These layoffs are sweeping through many tech giants. Guys, I know quite a number of my guys in the US that they don't have any job anymore. Quite a number of people got laid off. There are instances of people even telling me the interviews that they've attended now, the offering on the table is far from what it used to be. So let's set the tone for this conversation by watching this quick news report on layoffs.
The U.S. labor market cooled notably last month after the U.S. added 175,000 jobs in April, less than the 240,000 that economists had expected. But let's zero in on the tech sector for a second here. That industry seeing sharp decelerations in hiring in recent years, as well as slashing thousands of jobs this year. Just in April alone, some of the world's biggest companies, including Tesla, Google, and Apple, collectively cut over 20,000 jobs. This according to the latest data published by Layoffs.FYI. For more on this, I'm joined by Paula Bratcher-Ratliff, who is the Women Impact Tech CEO. Great to have you here with us today. Let's talk about some of the broader layoffs that we've seen within tech and what you're noticing, especially as it impacts women in the workforce.
Thank you so much for having me today, Brad. The implications of the data are pretty striking. We've had 4 years of significant volatility for tech workers. Most significantly impacted are the salaries. As we are starting to see things improve, you can't ignore that there's been a significant decline in salaries across the U.S. Our data shows that salaries have decreased for tech workers at about 12.1%. And the markets that are most drastically impacted are markets where we see tech hubs like Silicon Valley. They took probably the largest impact at about 15%, with other tech hubs like New York and Seattle following behind at 11 and 12%. Yes, you're showing the best news of the information that we're gathering, and that is that some smaller areas, less known for tech hubs, are gaining in salary increases. So markets that we're encouraging women in technology to focus on are markets like Houston, Austin, Phoenix, where we are seeing increases in salaries for tech workers across the U.S.
Yeah, it's actually remarkable. And I remember actually visiting all of these cities over the past several years and speaking with people about the number of tech roles and companies that were setting up camp. I mean, Austin naturally gets brought up with, of course, Google or Alphabet right in downtown area, and then the number of tech companies and jobs that get brought that direction. Tesla also setting up factory there. All of these things considered, what are the types of roles that we're really seeing emanate in a lot of the inclinations that companies have right now to grow out their business?
Right, that's a great question. And what we're seeing some increases this year that have been a really positive influence. So we're seeing about 20% increase over prior year's trajectory and hiring for tech workers, and a lot of that has been powered by AI. So there's always been this concern, will AI cause us to lose more tech workers? And we're seeing the opposite effect. AI and other innovations are driving more tech need for organizations, and we're seeing improved hiring and improved hiring in the human capital space for tech because of AI and the impacts of resumes and resume writing. So I think for the tech sector, AI is definitely seeing a positive trend for them, and we expect to see that continue through 2024 throughout this year.
You started to touch on this. Just want to circle back to it. The wage disparities that we're seeing right now in the tech sector, what is the leading cause of that from your analysis and what you're studying?
Yeah, unfortunately, we saw women in the workforce actually making improvements in gender equity as we came out of the pandemic. Unfortunately, over the last year, those small improvements that we saw have now leveled off to where when you look at the data across the board for the last 4 years, we're still seeing women make about 16.5% less in tech than their male colleagues across the board.
So guys, you have an idea of where I'm coming from about this tech layoffs. The same way some people are laid off, you also see opportunities for quite a number of people in a particular sector. Gemola, my first question is going to be to you. Now, so looking at where we currently start and how organizations are, trying to restructure their system based on the advance in technology, which necessarily making them make decisions around, do I need these resources? If I don't need this, if this work can be done by advanced technology, AI, and others, So looking at that current situation for African tech workers, and that seems to be our core interest. How should they prepare themselves for this situation, right? What is the potential ripple effect of this global layoff, or is Africa to an extent immune from this?
Thank you so much, Afo. I think the first thing I would say would be that the best time to buy an umbrella is before it starts raining, right? And I think that because if you don't buy it at that point in time, if they tell you the umbrella is 1 million naira, you don't have a choice. You're going to be very, very well, right? And I think it's just understanding that you are the primary driver of your career, right? A mentor of mine used to say that if people see reading like they see eating, the world will be a better place. So I think that primarily the first place to start is understanding that the CEO, everybody is a CEO, right? And a CEO of your own career. I think it's important to set up that foundation. I think that's one. Two, as regards to your question about is African tech ecosystem immune? Unfortunately, the answer is no, right? Because the way it works is a ripple effect of a number of things. So here are my thoughts. First, if for some reason the economy is not doing too well, investors pull back. If investors pull back, what that means is that businesses have lower funds to experiment and play with, right? Because businesses, especially when they're listed in stock exchanges, they want to prove to their investors that they are making profit. And there are only two ways you can make profit: make more money or cut down costs, right? Unfortunately, the first place most CEOs will go to when it comes to signaling to their investors that they are maximizing profit, especially when they're in a climate that is not making as much money, is to do one thing, which is cut down costs. Now, there are two types of costs, right? It's fixed cost and it's variable cost. Now, fixed cost is fixed because most times you can't do anything about it, which leads us to variable cost. And unfortunately, the easiest, sadly enough, to push off that feast or that table is employees. I try to look at it from a perspective of the business owners are not bad people. I feel sometimes in the media, kind of makes it seem like, oh, these top tech companies are evil. They are not. They are bad people and all of that. After you have been in business for decades, right? You come to realize that sometimes you have to make difficult choices to let people go, not because you don't love them, not because you're not good enough, but because your business has to stay alive. However, here are my thoughts on how I think you can be immune from this quote-unquote virus of being laid off, right? Immune being that it doesn't mean that, I mean, if anything happens, the subject cannot lose their jobs. But it means, like I mentioned earlier, you're the CEO of your career. The first thing is sharpening your skills and staying relevant. And that involves continuous learning and also specialization. So as long as you keep learning and stay on top of things, the odds are that you have built a compendium of knowledge that makes you very valuable and almost indispensable. On the other hand, specialization is also very, very important, because what I've come to realize is that experts are experts, right? And most of the time, because you're specialized and you have a niche, you have been able to immune yourself from competition, right? So if I ask you, this, a Nigerian man, I think Nigerian American, is a doctor. I think it's one of the only few, if not the only, cardiologists and nephrologists in the world or in America or something, right? So basically, cardiology is doctor for the heart, nephrology is doctor for the kidneys, right? And he has two specializations. And I think that he now has sub-specialization, I think is focused on children, which is pediatrics. So what that means is that he has tripled his three-factor authentication at this point, right? Because what he has been able to do is say, you know what, I'm a doctor, that's one. Two, I'm a heart doctor, that's two. Three, I'm a kidney doctor, that's three. Four, I'm a kidney doctor, a heart doctor, and a doctor that specializes in children. So what that means is that more or less, yes.
Hold your thought. I still intend to drill on that point. 3 points of authentication, right? For African tech actors, enthusiasts, players to remain relevant and not be a victim of this layoff, you should be triple factor of authentication. If, in your own opinion, looking at Tesla's strategic shift, what opportunities might open up to tech professionals in Africa? Looking at all the African companies that we have, how should they realign their focus? Demola already talked about triple points of authentication.
Yeah, I think there are numerous ways that we can catch this. First is the one we are all conversant with, which is the growth of startup ecosystem. So as Tesla is trying to develop, have a strategic shift towards autonomous driving, there's a need for us to actually capitalize on that by ensuring that we have an ecosystem that focuses on actually tailoring solutions that are peculiar to our own needs, right? Such as we can start looking at developing affordable autonomous vehicles, and also we know that Nigeria, we are more particular about agriculture and all those things. We can also go into robotics, and also I think there should also be the need for skill development in these emerging technologies, because AI is the way, and there's a lot of skill acquisition that people can get from developing AIs and also robotics. And I think data science is one of the leading course of when it comes to education. People are more moving into data science, which is quite crucial at this age. I think as Africans, we still have a lot of things to do, and I know we are getting there.
Demola, I held your thought, but I want you to respond to this very quickly before we move to the next topic. Okay. Is AI the driver of this layoff? Like, you look at the way it is now. I think a couple of weeks ago, there was news around Microsoft also, massively downsizing in Nigeria. And as a matter of fact, they said they've closed one of their major offices or operations in Lagos. And very quickly, the federal government or somebody came to debunk the news and all of that. Is AI the driver of this?
Well, the truth is, I won't say it's the only driver, but I will say it's innocent until proven guilty. Right? I mean, yes and no. Why yes? Yes, because of the things that we have seen that AI is beginning to do, it can set up light in someone's mind and say, hey, wait a minute, that assistant that's always helping me that I can tell to track my minutes of meetings, I pay him 100,000 naira a month. I can as well just plug in an AI in my Zoom and I have a summary of my meetings every time, right? So what does it mean? It means that I can save 1.2 million naira for the year. So I tried first meeting, second meeting, third meeting, and it works. I can give the guy a 3-month probation, right? And that's 1.2 million naira saved. Easy. On the other side of, so what that means is that because of the ease of how people are able to, how things are able to get done, it's very easy for people to just think that, you know what, I can discard. On the other hand as well, I think that the early adopters of AI begin to realize that, wait a minute, right? Let's not throw caution to the wind. There's still some human context to these things, you know. And I'll give an example, just as I round off my thoughts, right? An example would be, let's say Google Maps. We can almost couch it as some sort of intelligence helping us to navigate, right? I mean, there's a guy in Germany that did something very funny. He put about 20 mobile phones in a basket, put all the maps on, heading to the same location, and stood there. And guess what? Google Maps said there was traffic. And the truth about it, was it traffic? It was a free road. However, based on the garbage in, garbage out, right? The Google Map interpreted that logically so because data gave him the insights that it was traffic, as it was traffic. So guess what? If you're trying to navigate that route that day, and that guy was doing that very interesting experiment, you won't be able to move because you think, okay, there's traffic.
Sorry to cut you. I would like to look at that experiment because if it's on a freeway and all those phones are in that vehicle and they are moving at the same time, you can't call that traffic because Google Map, of course, also works with speed.
Yes,
So
but it wasn't. So interestingly, right? It was walking. It wasn't in a car.
Oh, okay.
So he was walking. Another experiment, I think at some point, he even gave other people to also walk with him, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that sometimes fact is not truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, let's not delve into that. But the point I'm trying to make is, your question, is AI the cause? Yes and no. I think for the yes is, of course, people are going to think and say, you know what, how can I cut my costs, you know, to be more efficient? On the side of no, people are beginning to realize that, you know what, I think humans are also very, very important. But I think time will tell.
If you look at the news, right, the news report we just finished, we just finished watching, right? It's a combination of both. The same way you're having downsizing, you know, happening massively, that has affected quite a number of jobs. You also have opportunities for quite a number of new skill sets, which comes with AI, of course. In my conversation with Shola last week, Shola was, I mean, of course, you guys know that he's an AI evangelist. His point of view is very straightforward. Embrace it and work with it. This is a major opportunity that the earlier you get on, the better for you. He said, when I try to relate it with weapon of mass destruction, Shola was quick to call my attention to technology is always technology. We have a world where we were fighting with bow and arrow, with spears, with knives, right? Then you have cocking of gun, moving to submachine guns, and now all sophisticated weapons that we have. Heaven did not fall. Regulation happened, right? So whether you like it or not, things would always shape out itself. But for you to try to stifle or do all sorts of get wary about it, embrace it and run with it. So let's move on to the next conversation. Ife, can you quickly play that video as quickly as you can? It's around the Binance sentencing. You know, we still have a case going on in Nigeria around it. I expect this to have a major influence on the court's decision in one shape or form.
Binance founder CZ sentenced to 4 months in prison on anti-money laundering charges. Joining us for more is Bloomberg News reporter David Gura. Okay, David, walk us through the perspective here. 4 months.
Yes, much less than the prosecution wanted. Those sentencing guidelines were 12 to 18 months. The prosecution wanted 36 months in total. So 4 months is radically less than what they had hoped for. And the judge, when he was handing down this sentence, was largely unsympathetic to the argument that the government made that this was a calculated decision by Changpeng Zhao, by CZ, to evade money laundering rules, to not have a money laundering program in place at Binance. So a slap on the wrist, I think you could characterize it as in terms of like what it might have been otherwise.
And we should point out, I mean, he pled guilty to these charges, anti-money laundering charges, and there was another charge in there I'm forgetting here, and he agreed to pay a pretty hefty fine.
Yeah,
right?
$50 million. Yeah. And I think what's tricky about this is it's entangled with this other plea deal that the company made for $4.3 billion. Mm-hmm. So in that is a swirl of all of the things that Binance admitted to doing, that is facilitating a lot of transfer of money among illegal entities. He very narrowly pleaded to this charge of just not having this money laundering program, anti-money laundering program in place. So all of that exists on the sidelines, but his was much narrower than that.
I really want you guys to look at this news from two different angles, right? With a special focus on Nigeria and Africa. The good news is Demola is a banker, so you also might also wear your banker's cap in this particular conversation. Two part of it, there's a part that has to do with sentencing the executive of that organization for their failure for what they've done. And the second part of it, of course, is the fine that comes with it. Now, in the case of Nigeria, if you compare it to the Western world, especially US, the fear of fine seems to be the beginning of wisdom, right? Banks are very quick to cut out your check for you. I mean, if they find anything suspicious, they'll simply just cut out your check for you and say, let my people go. Or just take your money and take a walk. Okay? Because of your 50,000 deposit, I can get myself in a situation of paying hundreds of millions of fines. But for some reason, is it that our own regulators here are, toothless dog? So, Demola, the first question for you, with Nigeria on focus, looking at African crypto exchanges, what should we learn from these Binance regulatory issues? AML that was mentioned there, Anti-Money Laundering Act or whatever it is, what should we learn from this?
I think, as you said, I should wear my banker hat. So I think that before, just to simplify it, right, I would say that there are 3 stages to money laundering, right? I won't delve too deep. The first one is placement, the other is layering, and the last is integration. What that means is that these are the different phases and stages to money laundering. So I think that, of course, every government has the responsibility to protect citizens and protect its country, to ensure that resources are not moved about, illegally. Because more often than not, money laundering is done to hide funds. And more often than not, these funds are from questionable sources, right? Because the truth about it is every legally ethical and moral entity will not have any issue to declare the funds that they have, or will want to try to move the funds in ways that are called for. It's just like saying that, if you're in your house, the way you go and steal meat from your mom's pot when you were 7 years old, it's different from the confidence you have if she's going to take the meat, right? So I think it's better it's best to start on that note. And second thing I also say, to answer your question, would be that Binance, for example, particularly, right, they have been under a lot of scrutiny because most times their approach is such that because they want to grow very fast and expand to new markets, they expand first, following the startup methodology of, move fast and break things, right? Unfortunately, sometimes they break themselves too along the way. So, they have moved very fast, expand, which is good, agile methodology and all of that. But in most cases, they don't really understand the rules because the AML rules, anti-money laundering rules for different countries differ. Nigeria has Central Bank of Nigeria. Ghana has the Bank of Ghana. The US has the Fed. The UK has the Bank of England. So the point I'm trying to make is these laws are a bit different in all of those places. For example, comparing that to GDPR laws, data privacy, right? In Europe, for example, data privacy laws are more stringent, right, than in the US. What that means, that's why you have a lot of startups growing faster in the US. So I don't want to delve into that. But the point I'm trying to make is the laws are quite different. And it's important for your business, whether you want to be an exchange company or any business at all, to first understand the policies governing your business and understand the intricacies of the niche you want to delve into. You can't say, for example, you want to do something in financial services or fintech, right, and not get certain licenses, right, and not work with certain bodies, and not be open to certain scrutinies, right? And just to also wrap up, I'll say that here are some things that, some exchanges can also adopt. So let's say, for example, you want to start up with crypto exchange, you want to do anything along that lines. First, you have to be proactively compliant to ensure that you know your onions, you know the rules. Second is transparency. And I think that most times, this example we're giving with CZ and Binance, transparency was a problem, right? And I think this was years ago, by the way, for context, right? This happened way, a very, very long time ago. I think at the very early stages of a year or two into Binance's operations, right? So it's not something that happened very much recently. But ignorance is not an excuse, right? You're setting up a finance business, you should be able to block the leaking tabs and block the holes to ensure that people are not manipulating the wrong way. And the last thing I'll say is collaboration with regulators, right? Regulators are a friend, quote and unquote. It's important to understand, vis-a-vis what they're talking about, and just to get a sense of how things are changing and how the landscape is evolving. So all in all, I think it's important to generally understand the policies around your business and understand, in this case, which is finance and crypto exchange, the anti-money laundry rules, and just ensure that you're proactively compliant. There's nothing like being over compliant. Second is ensure you collaborate with the regulators. Be in good standing with them. And last but not least, communicate. I'll just end on this note. Imagine if CZ has communicated, say, you know what, this was happening, right? He has the evidence to say, oh, once upon a time, via this email or through this memo, I communicated this and I said this. I think things would have been different for him. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you buy Bitcoin, you invest in Bitcoin, and sometimes a lot of people in Nigeria are not even mindful of what could happen to their wallets just by way of government and policy and government decision. From your own point of view, what should be Nigerians' interest in this particular case, and how can we have been affected individually? Or what are your general thoughts around it? Don't let me box you to.
Let me start with CZ. CZ has right from time, he has actually been a compliance guy. If you follow him on Twitter, his goal is always to advance KYC and anti-money laundering practices. And in one of his quotes, he said, compliance is a journey, especially in new industries like crypto. We welcome more constructive guidance to help us move forward. So coming from someone like that, I think we should all know that the crypto space itself, it's a new industry. And, these companies, they are always trying to ensure that they come up with these regulations.
Demola, my own take is on this is still around what Nigeria is doing to be ready for. There's quite a lot of things that are going on compared to how it works, in other places, right? Binance, what they comply with in US compared to a Nigerian situation are too far apart, right? We're talking about AML, we're talking about KYC. How long did it take us as a country to get to the point of proper regulation? In the case of Binance, before it became an issue. And outside Binance, how many activities that are still going on? We talk about this almost every day. People can walk into any bank, deposit of thousands of dollars, right, without any track record, no proper documentation. I can walk into Wema Bank, Demola, and make deposit in your name without your consent, and nothing happens. You can't do that in US, though.
Yeah, of course.
To make a deposit, every deposit is tied to your name. Yeah, you have to present your ID. You can't just walk into a bank and claim to be Demola. You understand what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? So that's in a case of Nigeria, you have people having accounts in the name of their maids, in the name of their gatesman and all of that, and they move around with the MasterCards, with the Visa card, and they would travel abroad and spend anyhow, So on the regulation side, I don't know what is happening.
Yeah, so like I said, for the regulation side, you wouldn't believe that even the new Binance CEO, that's Richard Teng, He actually said some set of people, like within the government space, they actually approached them that they should pay some amount of money, and Binance, they would leave Binance alone in Nigeria. So if we are talking about regulations itself, I think we should start from addressing some certain internal issues within the governments, because if the CEO can be saying that, and I think we should start looking at ourselves first. And crypto is a new industry, and we have a lot of exchanges, KuCoin, Bybit. They are looking at ensuring that all these things are in place, and things like this will happen. But someone just has to take the shots for it, and that was what's happened to CZ.
I think what we discussed earlier around AI is also still applicable here. At the end of the day, it's important for this thing to be properly guided. It's important for government to also be ahead of, to really, not playing catch up. Do you understand? To also preemptively make decisions or take actions that would ensure that things have not gone bad before government wakes up to their responsibility. Anyway, guys, let's
Sorry,
move
let me
to
just share a final thought. Sorry, before we move on. Sorry. So I think that we talk about in my office, right? Innovation always chooses after regulation. Regulation always chooses after innovation, rather.
Innovation,
right?
yeah.
Being that innovators will be ahead, then afterward they'll figure out how to regulate. I think that's the case. And like Ife said, I think it's a collective effort. Thank God Nigeria Startup Bill was passed. I know there's some regulation around blockchain, which is the premise technology for Bitcoin and crypto, right? So I think that the government, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I think the government is also trying to protect its people. Because the truth about it is, as interesting as crypto is, as all these things are, there are also downsides, right? It also has also an enablement to fund certain kind of things that are not permitted, right? So I think the government's responsibility to ensure that there's law and order, and I think I'll end by saying that ultimately governments across the world, they want control, right? And they typically are afraid as to what they cannot control. Are they the best ones to control it? Well, that's not my place to say. But I feel that as long as the government is, the people that put the government there, right, some way, somewhat, the government's responsibility is to ensure that there's law and order, and things go like they should go. But let's see how these things play out. I think eventually we will all come to a common ground.
I believe so too, and especially for Nigeria and some other African countries, right? Already we are talking about weakness in regulation. Another big issue is even for cases where policies and regulation exist. Enforcement. How many of the existing ones have we enforced, right? If I mention, the case of Binance, and where some people already engaged Binance and they're saying, pay this, and we'll make the problem go away, right? There's a major weakness in enforcement. Anyways, guys, let's move to the lighter part of our conversation. The social media. Wizkid, Don Jazzy, and Davido. If you want to tell us about this issue.
I think the issue started with Wizkid throwing some jibes at Davido. Then I think a major celebrity from Navin actually commented on a Wizkid post, and Wizkid said he's not an influencer or something.
Wizkid has thrown that jab the way he did. What is the history of because this conversation, this back and forth between them comes way back. Wizkid and Davido comes way back. The part I don't understand is, what has Don Jazzy got to do with this, Demola?
Okay, I think there are two separate conversations, right? So I think it's Wizkid versus Don Jazzy, Wizkid versus Davido, right?
Yes.
So I think let's start with Wizkid versus Don Jazzy. I think I'm not very, very, very aware of how things play out, but the little I know is, I think an artist under Maven label called Ladipo is a rapper, right? I think he made a comment about the fact that, the ways to talk about right now that rappers are no longer cool or are no longer trendy is now Afrobeats, right? So he's now saying that he's looking forward to a future where Afrobeat artists, right, would now become what rappers have become, quote unquote. And Wizkid being a prominent Afrobeat artist, I mean, someone tagged him. I now said, oh, he doesn't respond to artists that are signed by influencers. So obviously everybody knows that Maven Records is owned by Don Jazzy. So I think that word influencer is not wrong, but I mean, of course, he meant it in a disrespectful tone, right?
Yes.
Because influencers make a lot of money, right? But Don Jazzy is way beyond an influencer. There's a lot of people consider him to be an entrepreneur, a legend,
Par excellence
in the music and entertainment space, right? So more or less like narrowing down someone's achievements, right, to just being an influencer. A lot of people didn't take it well. So I think that was that. I don't know how that played. Of course, people came about defend Don Jazzy and all of that. I also think that there was a backstory about Don Jazzy making a comment about Wizkid. I think a year or a couple of months ago as well. So anyways, I think that's part one. Part two is Wizkid and Davido, right? And like you said, there's been something going on for a number of years, back and forth. I don't know details of it, but I think that is tied to natural rivalry of two people, just like Ronaldo and Messi, right? Human beings like that comparison, And for me, I always say enjoy both. Both artists. Sabo what they have to offer, right? Doesn't have to. They don't have to. There's not supposed to be a best in most cases, right? Because best is relative. Just like, for example, I believe Cristiano Ronaldo is the best player ever. So most people believe, some other people believe Messi, right? And that's fine, right? So I think it's a rivalry thing that stemmed from a number of years. But I think what triggered this one particularly was because I think there was a comment and Wizkid posted a meme of the dude kneeling down and crying, saying, beg me like this. More or less like, beg me, then use, of course, Davido's picture to more or less convey the message. Then, of course, things went haywire and all of that. But your question how should artists conduct themselves and handle the situations, right?
Yeah.
I think as an influential figure, you have to be 10 times careful than everybody else. If you say that Afo is an interesting person and I'm an influential figure, that word interesting can be contexted in different ways. Afo is such an interesting person. Afo is such an interesting person, So like that word interesting can mean different things. But if I'm an influential figure that have over 100 million followers, it could. So you have to be extremely careful. I think that's one. Two is it's important to not express yourself in the spur of the moment. Because what I see here is a lot of spontaneity. You just have your phone, someone sends you a message and you just go all out. They're human beings, I get it. But it's more at stake, And lastly, I will say that's why they have a lot of, PRs and people working with them to ensure that their personal brand and personal image is not tainted. Some people might believe that, oh, I want to be original, Be yourself. But in some context, you have to be very careful about being yourself, right? Because, for example, at work, right? People always talk about, oh, come to work with your original self. I agree with that. There's some level of wisdom to it. So I think in a nutshell, it was just very, very interesting banter. And lastly, there's a thing. Who knows? All this might just be for publicity for something, right? Which might come up in a later date.
Well,
because in this space,
if it was intentional, Demola, if it was intentional or unintentional, whether you like it or not, we're having this conversation around it. It's already a publicity stunt. Do you understand? By design or not.
Exactly. So, sorry, sir, before you go on, interestingly, this ties into this away from Wizkid too. I think it was sometime in the week, Portable, right? The very interesting Portable was arrested. Yeah. Interestingly, he released a song on Thursday.
Yeah.
Guess the title of the song?
Spider-Man.
Exactly.
So
and guess what?
Go ahead.
Yeah, and guess what? Whether you like it or not, like you said, we're talking about this. And people are going to go and listen to it. At the end, they'll say, oh, such a whatever song, whatever comment they have. But guess what? They have listened. Right? And they'll share. Oh, have you heard this horrible song? I've not heard it, I'm just saying, right? And they'll say, oh, it's so horrible. But guess what? I mean, Google Music or whatever platform he's using to stream is going to pay him Spotify and all those other guys, right? So you come to realize that, sadly enough, I mean, I think I'll wrap up by saying that someone said something, I think a month or two ago, that the sad thing about social media is that you have to be popular. What you're popular for doesn't really matter.
It doesn't
As long as you
matter.
have people to be engaged and the people view what you're talking about. Sadly enough, I think that has watered down the substance we get to see these days, sadly enough.
Which side are you? Are you with the Whiskey fans base or the Davido fans base? Which side did you take on this particular?
For me, I actually enjoy like their music, like both of them. I don't really listen to like Afro beats like that. My own music taste is more like contemporary. So, but based on what Demola said, I think there was a time Demola mentioned something. He said a lot of social media users, they don't know they are the product, right? And I think these celebrities, they've been able to figure this out. So whenever they are trying to like release, because I've actually seen this play out in like different scenarios, like just like the case of Portable. Whenever they are trying to release a song or whenever they are trying to release a movie, take for example, I think 3 months back when Eniola was it Eniola Badmus when she handed the most beautifully dressed this thing to Bobrisky. So it was actually a stunt so that a lot of people can get to like see a movie and all those things. And I think these celebrities, they've actually identified this and they try to like really cause a stir on the social media space because a lot of people would engage with it. For Wizkid is going to, I think Wizkid is about to release an album, and we could argue that was the cause of because it came out of nowhere and started tweeting like unprovoked, right? So I think they've actually seen this. A lot of celebrities have seen this as
so what you guys, and you know why I love this conversation, right? Whether we like it or not, our celebrities are technically tech actors themselves. They even seem to understand the game even more than a bulk of the Gen Zs that are tech actors in tech space, because the creators of the algorithm themselves, like people that understand how the algorithm work, whether you like it or not, are also making this celebrity get the best out of them. Because if you look at those that are either reacting, commenting, fighting back and forth, are people that even understands how these things work even better.
Exactly.
Now, exactly. What I narrowed from this conversation was using Demola's example of Portable. So Portable woke up and realized that, you know what, I need to pay for this G-Wagon. Now, to pay for this G-Wagon, first,
I need to release it.
No. Let me default, get arrested. When I'm arrested and released, there will be news around it. I'm going to run to the studio, make a music, make money, pay for the G-Wagon that I'm owing, pay for the house in Lekki that the state I'm owing that I've bought that I can't pay for. Do you understand? So, if I got you correctly, everything we saw around Portable issue was intentional. If you also argue that Wizkid has not released album for quite a while, and he wants to release his new album, one album. So he probably would have had a conversation with John Jazzy or that Don. I'm going to do a job at you, a very big one. Just calm down. It's to help my album. Do you understand? He also would have reached out to Davido. Don't worry, I'm using you as meme. But leave all those zombies. They will respond to it the way we want them to.
Leave the products. The products will respond to it.
They will consume and react the way we expect them to react. And exactly what has happened. Anyways, guys, let's move to our next conversation, which, guys, you understand how important this is to us. It was part of our opening remark. 7% of Nigerian youth between the age of 15 and 24, just 7% has IT skills. Ife, Demola, we saw this firsthand when we move around in Lagos, schools in Lagos. I'm even talking about private schools now. How many of these schools that we visited has computer system? Engaging the kids, how many of them are IT literate? To know how to operate phone doesn't even make you illiterate in any shape or form. Guys, this is really worrisome, and you now understand how I've really committed myself to what we are doing. What is termed end of life in US is the beginning of life in Africa. Demola, I want you to hold your thought. If you would have the first floor now. This is more important to you than Demola.
Yeah, I think few months back I was in Gombe, right? And I realized that there are a lot of children, they are focused on what they want to eat rather than the education itself, right? I think poverty is one of the major things. It is the major important factors when it comes to like educational marginalization, right? And coming down to Nigeria, I was actually surprised to see that a lot of secondary schools, even the so-called private schools in Nigeria, they don't really take ICT education as a thing. So they are still like stuck back at the past educations, like, you know, English and all those things. And I was actually expecting some sort of improvements because I actually asked some of the students some questions about their what they want to be and their exposure to technology, and I realized that a lot of them don't really know about this. Rather, they are much more focused on being a social media influencer and all that. So it made me to think that is it that the introduction of tech into the Nigerian education, is it that we are not moving fast enough, or we are not getting it right somewhere? Like, it's actually somewhat challenging.
So put it in the right context so that Demola can respond to it. You guys, let's flip the report for us to really put a more sense of emphasis on how bad the situation is. Demola, 93% of Nigerian youth between the age of 15 to 24 have no ICT experience, ICT exposure. 15 to 24. I'm not talking about toddlers here. I'm talking about 15 to 24 without ICT education, ICT experience. And, you know, we keep talking about Africa, Nigerian having a seat on the table. You look at some of the projects of the new Minister of Innovation and Technology, and you ask yourself, what exactly is government doing at all levels if 93% are without ICT education?
I think that's actually staggering. In as much as I'm in the tech space, I found that very shocking. Because, you know, you always assume that these people, have some tech skills or have some literacy, digital literacy, I'd like to call it. I think the government is trying. I know the new minister there's this 3MTT initiative.
Yeah.
And I know there's this FGN Skills Hub, which interestingly we're partnering with Alerts by Wema is partnering with federal government on to empower young people. I know MasterCard is doing a whole lot as well, through initiatives. I know ALX is also doing quite a lot. So this old school, there are a lot of Detailing, there are a lot of other companies that are springing up trying to do stuff, right? But I think it boils down to one thing, which I'll call deliberateness, right? And I use India as a classic example, right? In the 70s or thereabouts, or early 80s, I think they sat down and said, you know what can we export to the world? And they came up with a blueprint and a roadmap to say, you know what, we don't have oil or some of these natural resources as you might try. We can export talent. And they started building the IITs, right? The International Institute of Technologies. They have quite a number of ones in India, right? And they own it on that. And right now, India is de facto tech capital of the world. For context, the CEO of Google is Indian, CEO of Microsoft is Indian, CEO of Adobe is Indian, right? HP now, new CEO is Indian or has Indian origins. The point I'm trying to make is
Microsoft, YouTube.
Microsoft, Google, Google, a couple of other guys. And I mean, if you think about sourcing from the US, when it comes to technology, the first point to outsource is India. That's because they have a plethora of talent. In fact, some of these tech companies already have a strong presence in the Indian market. For context, Google Cloud, is it Google Cloud? Yes, I think Google Cloud has the highest number of adopters in India. I think there was this interview I watched with the Google CEO. So that's just to show you, I think YouTube as well and some other platforms, right? The highest amount of users they have is in India. So I think that deliberateness is it, right? Yes, they are doing a whole lot, but activity is different from accomplishment. And you can be running on a treadmill, you're making motion, doesn't mean you're making progress, right? So as much as possible, it's important for our government and other stakeholders to be very deliberate. To say, this is a blueprint. It's going to take a while. We are very deliberate and intentional. Because the only thing Africa really has, aside natural resources, is people. Niger has an average age of 14. Right? By 2050, most of the world young people will be from Africa. Right? So deliberateness is the word. We have to take the bull by the horn. And we have to look at these numbers as a source of discouragement, but a source of inspiration. You say, you know what, 93% don't have it. Over the next 5 to 10 years, what can we do about this? Because the truth about it, they are still young people. I mean, they can still pick up, they can still learn. And ultimately become assets to themselves and assets to society, our society, and generally access to the world. So I think deliberateness, the government, stakeholders, everybody has to be more deliberate. Another thing I'll say is education, and not just from the standpoint of going to school, right? Education in a very agile manner. How can we run 3 to 6 month boot camps, 6 to 12 month boot camps, and get people up to speed? Right? There's no time to say you want to go for a 3, 4, 5 year degree anymore, because the world is changing. OpenAI did not exist 4 years ago. In fact, I mean, Google did not exist 30 years ago. The iPhone did not exist 20 years. So the point I'm trying to make is we have to take bull by the horn. 1, be deliberate, and 2, ensure that we have tangible education that people can leverage on, to shape the future.
The best time to be in tech was 10 years ago. Another best time is now. And I think, like you rightly said, we have to be intentional and all hands must be on deck. It has to be a combined effort. India is not, I mean, the examples you gave are high-level examples, the CEO level, right? The CEO level examples. If you bring it down to some very interesting level and see the community, the communal effort around the push you see in the Indian space today. Like, for example, India has this culture of everybody helping everybody. I mean, someone was sharing a bitter experience with me just for you to see why we also need to have this effort at the individual level, at the community level, religious level. Everybody must work with that direction. If this is the framework, that framework must reflect in everything we do, that this is a brute force. We're putting all effort, we're putting all energy to make things happen. You said something earlier, which I believe is also applicable in this context. AI has come to democratize, has even really become a bridge. So it's not an issue of the rich has monopoly of knowledge or what have you now. It's an opportunity for everybody to have, to be a player, I mean, depending on what effort you are putting into it. Why would Apple, for example, be moving their factory to India? It's because of the availability of talent. The resources are available. You understand what I'm saying? So I think this is something that concerns not just government now. Government, private sector, parents, we all must collaborate together to make a difference. But to be honest with you, that 93% or 7%, depending on which angle you want to look at it from, half full or half empty, it is still the same.
Just to add to it, Afo, like a lot of like there's also, primary schools, 3% of primary schools that are privately owned barely have computers. And I think it has to like start from the ground base. Like, how can these people understand how to utilize, how can these children, how can they understand how to utilize AI without actually understanding what a computer is? Like the program you initiated, which is the IT Launchpad, it's also like gave us an insight that a lot of these kids in these primary schools, they don't have access to computers. And I think one of the major things I'll just advise the government to do is to look into their plans and try to like make it compulsory for primary schools to have computers, like, because that's like the foundation of when we were doing IT Launchpad. Then a lot of kids from these public schools, they came and they saw some of them were just seeing computers for the first time, like in Lagos.
For the first time.
And that's
This is
so.
Lagos. So Demola,
Yeah.
how can you help me now, right? So when I told you I'm looking for all the old computer in US, like what is being referred to as end of life in North America is the beginning of life. Now you see that truly when I say there's problem with this fact. How can we really move this system, mass movement of these computers to Africa, to Nigeria for starters, right? How can we make this happen? This is not good at all. Yes, the government is doing as much as they can. We more corporate organization, more individuals really need to get involved and make things happen. And trust me, people just need a launch pad. Like the minute you get an enabler, like your eyes are open. Trust me, the rest you can handle by yourself. Anyways, guys, let's move to the very final one, the part that Ife loves the most. Interestingly, both of you at the introduction stage, you both had mixed feeling on ChatGPT 4.0. Ife, you want to play that video now?
OpenAI invited myself and my son Imran here to try out some of their new technology. And so we're curious about how good it might be at tutoring someone in math on Khan Academy. So let's get it started. It's loading up. All right, make sure it can see our screen.
Actually, in this format,
hello there. I'm here with my son, and I'd love you to tutor him on this math problem, but don't give him the answer. You can ask questions and nudge him in the right direction, but I really want to make sure he understands it himself. And he's here in the room, so you can talk to him directly.
Of course, I'd be happy to help. Let's look at the problem together. Can you first identify which sides of the triangle are the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse relative to angle alpha?
All right, so I'm pretty sure this is the angle alpha right here, right?
Perfect. That's correct. Now, looking at the triangle, which side do you think is the hypotenuse?
Remember
the hypotenuse?
I'm not totally sure. I think it might be this one, but I really am not sure. This side AC.
You're close. Actually, side AC is called the adjacent side to the angle alpha. The hypotenuse is the longest side of a right triangle and is directly opposite the right angle. Can you find which one is the hypotenuse?
Oh, okay, I see. So I think the hypotenuse is this really long side from A to B. Would that be correct?
Exactly. Well done. Now that you've identified the hypotenuse, can you identify which side is the opposite side to angle alpha?
Okay, well, you told me earlier that this was the adjacent side, and I know that's the hypotenuse, so I'm guessing that this side, BC, is the opposite side.
Great deduction. That's absolutely correct. Now that you've identified all the sides relative to angle alpha, do you remember the formula for finding the sine of an angle in a right triangle?
Yeah, I know that the sine is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse.
Perfect. That's absolutely right. Now, can you apply that formula to find sine alpha in the triangle using the lengths of the sides that we've identified?
Okay, so I mean, you told me that 7, this side BC, is the opposite side. And then you said that the hypotenuse is the longest side, so that would be this side AB, which is 25. So would the answer be 7 over 25?
Excellent work. That's correct. Sine alpha equals 7 over 25. You did a great job identifying the sides and using the sine formula. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask.
Guys. Oh, where are we? Where are we? Ife, you're taking the first remark on this.
Well, from my own view, I think based on what's happened in 2023, that's
Ife, please, as much, I mean, I want you to connect this with AGI as in your response. You know,
yeah. So
connect it to it. You know, you said AGI is still like 5 years away, some few months ago. Go on.
I don't think so anymore, but I think OpenAI, I don't think so. I don't think so anymore. I think OpenAI, they've actually achieved something profound that I think they've achieved AGI internally, but they are keeping it. They don't want to push it out. And I think that was what happened in 2023 when OpenAI actually fired Sam Altman, and also they revamped their board members by replacing even Ilya. So they replaced Ilya also. Ilya is actually one of the founding members, is a software engineer, and he actually did a whole lot of work to achieving this. And now him leaving just a few days after the launch of GPT-4 raises a whole lot of questions. So for me, I think they've actually achieved AGI internally, but they don't want to, they are just using that AGI definition to just like cloud people's face and it's sort of like moving the goalposts, so to speak, because it's quite fascinating, the things we are seeing, and I think they've achieved AGI internally. This is just GPT-4. There's still GPT-5. Sam announced GPT-5, I think, earlier this year that OpenAI will be releasing GPT-5 by the end of the year. And GPT-4 is, if GPT-4 can be like this, how can we? So we won't be able to comprehend what GPT-5 is going to be. So I think they've achieved AGI internally. They are just keeping it. There's a whole lot of secrets to this thing, a whole lot. And I know Google is just sitting by one corner and just looking, and they are also trying to release theirs too. So let's just see how it goes.
They've been trying this conversation about Google working on something. I don't understand what they want to work on again. I don't know how quickly they can catch up.
It's a battle. It's a battle. It's a battle.
Demos. I'm always looking forward to your thoughts.
It's like I said at the beginning, it's scary, right? And I mean, maybe it's just a millennial in me, right? It's scary, you know. And obviously, I think I read something very interesting. Well, sad enough, right? So I think it was somewhere, I can't remember, a CFO, long story cut short, an organization lost money because someone depicted the CFO's face or video and made a call to him to do certain transactions, and the organization lost money, right? Yes. And truth about this is, how do I know that AFO is AFO on this call? How am I sure it's not a deep fake version of AFO?
In fact,
having this conversation?
Deborah, you're making me see this from another angle that I've never seen before. Fraudsters, Yahoo, this will be Yahoo what?
Cybercrime.
Yahoo Prime or what?
Cybercrime.
Cybercrime.
No, not even. I'm trying to give it.
I heard there's even a version of. I heard there's a version of.
By the time AI, deep fake gets embedded with Yahoo, what would be the title for that? Go on with your talk, Imola.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's scary, right? Very, very, very scary. And I think that, yes, I'm optimistic. I'm happy with the opportunities it's going to create. Just like everything else, it's like water, it's like anything, right? It's what you make of it. I'm also very scared for the fact that if it's in the hands of the wrong people, right, it has enormous potential for a lot of negative things. I think that, yes, the positives. I mean, let's just see how it all plays out. I understand the reservations. I mean, the stakeholders in OpenAI have, the founding members, the founding investors, the reservations they have as to, I think OpenAI started as a non-for-profit, basically with the aim to leverage on AI to do good for the world, full stop. However, they evolved into a for-profit, raised money from a lot of other stakeholders, and invested heavily in building this thing out. And, like I said at the beginning as well, the powers that be love certain level of control and order. Chaos is never in anybody's favor, right? And if this is in the wrong hands, oh my God, I can't even begin to think of the possibilities. However, I think beyond my doom and gloom message, let's look at the brighter side as well. What this also means from a positive standpoint is that you can look at the guy learning trigonometry from AI, personalized learning, right? Self-paced, customized, personalized learning, right? That understands what your peak periods are, that understands what analogies and things that you engage with the most. So for the first time ever, you're going to have that private tutor that suits your personality type, that suits your intelligence type. I can go on and on. So possibilities are endless. Excited for it. Like everything else, it's always important to have guardrails and have regulation and have some level of fencing, right? So things just don't go haywire. I think that generally, like I think you first said, that they have built AGI. I don't know. I might not think so. The reason why I won't think so is because there's stiff competition in that space right now. Google is there, Microsoft even has their own AI division. That's a story for another day. I know Amazon is beginning to invest so much in that space as well. And like a friend of mine said, this is still the very, very early stages. There's no winner yet. Let's see how things play out. And remember that OpenAI has some investments, but there are people that have a lot of money, right? I'm not saying that money is the only thing that's going to differentiate you as a competitor in this space. But you come to realize that there are people that can invest tons and tons of billions, to keep iterating this technology. But I think my final thoughts on this will be, just like everything else, is a tool. And I want to admonish everyone here, to use it for good. Like Google's motto once upon a time used to be, don't be evil. Right? So I also want to admonish anyone to ensure that as long as you're able to use this for the good of the world, it's a tool, and please use it to make some positive impact and positive change.
On that positive note, we'll be drawing the curtain on this week's edition of Tech Talk with AFO. It has really been a very interesting conversation looking at all the topics that we treated. I think the one that really, brought us to that sober state is what GPT 4.0 is about to be, looking at the implication of this generally. If you are a teacher, I'm sure you'll be worried. If your livelihood depends on teaching, right? Why do I need a tutor again? So many things going on. You look at how many jobs that depend so much on hands-on, right? Earlier we were talking about personal assistants. There are times that you want to have a conversation and you probably would like to just talk to yourself. Now you have that situation that you probably don't even need a psychologist. There's been quite a number of things that this, different use cases that this could be put to. We've had interesting conversation. We delve into key developments, reshaping the tech industry today. We started with the restructuring using Tesla as an example. To the sentencing of the Binance founder, we also even have our interesting social media moment Davido, Whiskey, and Don Jazzy. That was an interesting conversation. And of course, most importantly, we had a conversation around what is still a major concern for us in Nigeria and the rest of Africa, ICT penetration. The same way we're looking at the deficit we have in our own country, we also saw the major advancement that has happened in the other hemisphere of the globe. Really, you can see how the world is structured. Some at a major advantage, some at a disadvantage. Our own responsibility with Techtalk-With-AFO and friends is to try to see how we can bring out some of this conversation to the fore and see how we can bridge the gap. Guys, it's been a very interesting conversation. I appreciate you guys more than you can imagine. As usual, let's keep engaging and get the best out of the tech space. Thank you, guys.